Hi, this is Mike from Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and on today's video we're taking a look at the APNX AP1-v ARGB CPU cooler, which is this one here. This at the moment is retailing at places in the UK for somewhere in the region of about £30, which actually seems to be a pretty decent price. It's actually been considerably reduced. It has been on the market for a little while now, was at a considerably higher price. Recently there's been some price drops, so this is now becoming to be one of those coolers which is going to be more on people's radar, I feel, due to the price and also the quality of the construction, the looks, all that kind of good stuff. It's got 5 heat pipes, 6mm each, and also it has a solid aluminium construction, which I think is primarily the main selling point here. This is a really fantastic looking cooler, and if you appreciate design and you want performance and design all in one package, I think it's actually a pretty good option. So in today's video, I'm going to go through, talk about some of the specifications. I've done some testing on it as well with a Ryzen 7 7700 at various different wattages, and I'll give you my results for those a little bit later on, let you know if it's going to be suitable for your next build. This actually has a TDP rating of 245 watts. Really, these days, TDP ratings are one of those things which you can take very much with a pinch of salt. It's very hard to actually prove or disprove what it actually will cope with, because all processors kind of behave slightly differently. And today's video we'll be testing with my 7700, which actually has been running at 144 watts, and generally with most sort of CPU tower coolers it will try and reach around about 95 degrees Celsius. I'm happy to say it didn't reach that, so that is something to look forward to. But overall, I think that's actually a really nice cooler. It has a very unique look to it. I really do appreciate the time and effort and detail which has gone into this. For some people, there's going to be some of you out there in Viewerland who are looking at a CPU cooler and you just want that raw performance. You don't really give a darn what it looks like, whether it looks sexy, whether it's got bendy fins, all that kind of stuff, whether it's easy to install. You don't care. As long as it's cheap and it does the job, you're absolutely fine. But I think with this, you'll find if you take a closer look at the construction quality, the ease of use, and the price, I think it works out to be a pretty phenomenal purchase. So let's talk about some of the pros and cons of this particular cooler, and we'll try and drill in some of the specs as we're going through that. So we'll look at the pros first of all. So the pros is, ideally you can say the price. £30 for a 120mm tower cooler, especially a nice looking one, is actually a pretty decent price. And if you're looking at other coolers around a similar sort of price region, such as the Arctic Freezer 36, which has been a little bit cheaper, but is now going to be significantly more expensive. Yeah, there's a lot of things out there on the market which are in and around that sort of price point, from the likes of thermal rides, etc, etc. So price-wise is going to be a little bit of a debatable one, but I think it is definitely one of the pros. Another pro is the actual looks of it. It looks absolutely fantastic. If you like this sort of thing, it is actually available in white and black, so to fit in with various different types of build. There's also some nice little elements, such as around the outside edge, there's a little bit of a kind of chrome lip around it, which I actually really like. And it does really remind me actually of the NVIDIA Founders Edition cards. It's got that kind of smooth look to it, which is very premium. So that can be seen as a pro also. Other pros, extremely easy to install. So we've actually done a separate standalone video for installation for both Intel sockets and AMD sockets. And I've got to say it's really easy to do. And actually while we're talking about that, let's take a look at the components which we actually get to see how easy it is to install. So taking out of the box, you get the cooler itself as you'd expect. A nice looking cooler, has a addressable RGB lead and also a fly lead and a 4-pin PWM. PWM range between 600 and 1800 RPM. And a stated noise decibel rating of 16.1 to 32.8. I'm pretty sure that is over ambient, so whatever your ambient noise floor is, that's kind of above it, so add that on. It's not silent, and at around about halfway RPM, it starts to get audible, and at the top end you're just going to hear a lot of air, because it does actually move a lot of air. And the reason behind that is because this will actually move 76.3 CFM, so that's actually a lot of air to get through a 120mm fan. So yeah, definitely got the performance tick there. In terms of static pressure, you're looking at 3.36mm H2O, so actually a pretty decent static pressure also. Back to what is included in the accessories box. So actually it's very minimalist, which is very nice to see. That means it's going to be very easy to install. So on the Intel side of it, you get a bracket top plate, which is universal between the two. You also get your Intel parts bag, so blue plastic standoffs and silver screws. When you're installing this with Intel, because Intel motherboards don't have their own standard backplate, you do have to use a backplate. Now the backplate's actually pretty cool, nice solid piece of metal. Also, there are some 3M removable strips on there, so to make it adhesive, so you can stick it onto the back of your motherboard. You don't have to stick it on if you don't want to. If you want to make it easier to remove, that choice is entirely up to you, although for some people it will make installation easier. And overall, installation extremely easy to do. On the AMD side of things is even easier. You don't need the backplate, so all you need is your AMD fitting bag, which has got the red spacers in, and also you will need that top plate, as we said earlier, so that is the kind of the main fixing point. And that is essentially it. That is all you need for installation. You also get some included thermal paste. I haven't actually tested the thermal paste to see what it's like, but I guess as with most thermal paste, it's going to be more than adequate. That's pretty much it for what is actually included in the box. We'll take a closer look at the cooler, take a look at some various angles and also the RGB, which you've probably been seeing already for some B-roll we filmed. I think the cooler actually looks really nice. So you can see the 5 heat pipes on there, 6mm each, and also you have the exposed heat pipes on the bottom. So in theory, this should allow quicker heat transfer. Personally, I don't really see there's a great deal of difference between exposed or non-exposed. It depends on a lot of other characteristics of the cooler, but I suppose that potentially could help. Keeping the installation to a bare minimum is really good actually, because you have got some captive screws on here for attaching to the base plate, so that makes it a lot easier. Don't have to go ahead and assemble brackets and stuff for that. That's all there ready. And also the fan itself, there's no weird clips or anything holding the fan in place. It is snugly secured within that outer frame. In terms of dimensions as well, if you're thinking about putting this in a slightly smaller chassis, now the case we've got this in here is actually a little bit limited on headroom. So this is actually 157 mils in total height for the cooler, which ironically this specific case actually can fit up to 157 mil coolers, and it fits in there okay. I haven't tried the glass on yet, so potentially I might have to backtrack on that, but I think it's going to be absolutely fine. Another very positive pro of this is RAM clearance. Now with RAM these days, there's all kinds of RGB RAM and heat sinks which tend to be larger and larger. Now with this, you've got absolutely 100% guaranteed clearance for RAM because of the way that the fins and the actual heat sink is kind of swept back a little bit more, so keeping out of the way. There's no way this is going to interfere with any RAM whatsoever, so you've got no issues there at all. So that's the pros out of the way. Obviously there potentially is others which I may not have looked on, but these are the key things which I think are important. Let's take a look at some of the cons. Now obviously there isn't a perfect cooler on the market, at least not yet as far as I'm aware, so there is going to be some drawbacks. Now for me personally, I think one of the actual main drawbacks of this, and pretty much its only drawback, is the fact that the fan is actually in its own shroud. So this fan is fixed in place, which means if for some reason the fan should fail, not that it's very likely to, these type of units are generally pretty reliable, but bearings are bearings, so they can fail at some point. It has actually got a lifespan of 80,000 hours, so that is what it's rated for. So you should be absolutely fine, but just be wary that if for some reason you do need to change out the fan, whether it gets damaged or whatever, it is fixed in place, so unfortunately replacement is not possible. Another very, very small con, I think, is potentially the noise levels. With the fan at full speed, it does move a lot of air, so obviously there is going to be some turbulent noise there. It's not overly annoying, but it is a little bit louder than some I've seen, specifically the Arctic Freezer 36, which is exceptionally quiet. This does seem to move more air, but it does make a little bit of noise in doing so. And again, going back to that previous negative of the fan not being interchangeable, if you don't like the noise profile of the fan, you're pretty much stuck with it. So let's take a quick look now at some of the results now by very limited testing here. So again, Ryzen 7 7700. I've actually gone into the motherboard and unlocked all of the voltages, so I'm just basically pumping as much in here as the processor will actually allow me, which is somewhere in the region of about 145 watts for this particular CPU, although it is rated as a 65 watt part. Normally these will boost up to around about 90 watts quite easily, but I've just tried to throw as much wattage as I can just to try and get some heat into it. Generally this CPU, when you do unlock it, it will try and hit 95C, as does the 7700X, which is effectively is what you're making this by unlocking it. So let's take a look at some of our results. So this is running a Cinebench R23, did a 5-minute loop and also a single loop, and the results are pretty much identical, so we'll go through those. So the lowest recorded temperature we got on the CPU was 37.8 degrees Celsius. The highest recorded temperature was 87.1. This is drawing 145 watts as package power, And in Cinebench, we scored just over 20,000 points, so 20,026 points to be exact. So we are going to break that 20,000 point barrier, which is actually pretty good for this type of CPU. So we are allowing it to reach its full potential with this cooler. I should mention as well, the room temperature at the moment is somewhere in the region about 19 to 20 degrees Celsius. So that is your baseline temperature. So about 18 degrees over ambient for the idle and about 60 degrees over ambient for the stress test or core load. So actually not too bad at all, and pretty much in line with other coolers of a similar price point. So I think ultimately it's going to come down to the aesthetics of this. If you like the design, you like the look, the price I think is actually pretty decent for it. It's £30. I think is a very good price to pay for something of this quality. Now, of course, you can pay a little bit less and get something which looks a lot cheaper. But again, this cooler I think is targeted towards those who kind of value the aesthetics as well as performance. And I actually feel that in this particular instance, APNX have actually done a pretty good job. They've now got the price right for this. I think when it first came out, it was closer to £50, which I think is way too much for this type of cooler. But around about the £25, £30 mark, I think it's actually a serious contender. But what I think about it doesn't really matter. What you think about it does. So let us know in that comment section what you think about this cooler, what you think about the design. Have you tried one already? What are your thoughts on it? I'd be very interested to hear what you've got to say in that comment section below. I think that's going to wrap this one up. I've been Mike. This is Mike's Unboxing Reviews and How To, and hopefully we'll catch you in the very next video. Thanks for watching.